The cries in the Russian newspaper for the abdication of the Russian Tsar have been quieted. The Tsar took command of his armed forces and issued orders to his forces in Karelia and Moscow, and those armies marched into combat in Livonia and in Ukraine, wresting control from those territories from the Central Powers and contesting them. And this emboldened the Russian people to keep on fighting and motivated the people, and the morale of the nation has risen up as the newspapers are quiet, and support for the Tsar has grown. Of course, this is somewhat shaky ground because any victories or defeats by the Russian state, by the Russian army, will now be laid at the feet of the Tsar as opposed to his generals. The Russian throne is shaky, but hopefully the British Expeditionary Force underneath General Kitchener will be enough to stabilize the Russian throne. The German state, or the German Empire, is not doing well, at least in Africa. It is not doing well. It has lost almost in its entirety its German colonies, and only unprotected Southwest Africa exists, and Cameroon is contested. So things don't look as good as they could be on that front. On the Western Front, of course, there's this battle of build-up of forces on both sides by the Allies, or the Entente Cordiale, as well as the Central Powers, as neither of them has a clear advantage, and likely whoever makes the first move will cause most damage, not to the enemy, but to themselves. And now we look at the Kaiser fleet. The Kaiser fleet that he has so carefully built up and husbanded his resources is doing well. The American forces, the fleet now, have sent a blockade to blockade any trade routes into Germany, and the people of Germany are starting to feel a pinch of their resources, their trade routes being cut off. And so a bold maneuver has sprung into the head of the Kaiser, and the Kaiser must be satisfied. He sees an opportunity to end the war in one swift stroke. And the Kaiser is a man of bold and decisive action, although somewhat unrealistic and prone to risk-taking. And so we shall have something in store with the Kaiser fleet to see if we'll be successful. We shall strike a bold maneuver to try to topple the throne of our enemy. London and the whole of England is free of enemy troops. It is now our opportunity to brave the minefields off the coast of England, to engage the French fleet and make a landing and capture the throne of our enemy. And perhaps that will be sufficient enough to win this war. Welcome all to Operation Schlieffen. We are playing as in Axis and Allies 1914. Sorry for the long intro. I got a little long-winded there. It's late in the day, and I'm pretty tucked it out, but let's see if we can pull through on this one. So, as you saw here, there's some opportunity to make a decisive move and capture the throne of England, to capture the capital of our enemy. And having captured it, we will get the entirety of the treasury of the British, which will be somewhere around 30 IPCs. And not only will we destroy half the transport fleet of the British, and the entire French Navy, really at that point we can't really lose. And whatever we lose in resources when the Americans come back and hit us, we will simply rebuild using the resources that we captured from the British, basically almost in its entirety. Capturing the treasury, capturing this, that's a net gain of 36 IPCs. We could rebuild our 3 battleships in the next turn if we so choose to do so. And that would change the equation quite a bit too, because then at that point, really the only navies that can be brought to the table are through the French and through the Americans. And the French are pretty well tied up on the Western Front, and the Americans would have to come to the rescue, which means that the transport fleet, one of the threats that they pose, will be somewhat negated, as they would not only have to build up resources to try to capture Britain, but also to to defeat our fleet, but also to capture Britain as well. So it's going to be a tough one. It's a move that is a bold move, a risk move, but it might be worthwhile taking. It might be, and if it's not, then it's not, and I lose my fleet, and that's the end of my fleet, and the war continues onwards with whatever resources we have at hand. So that is the goal, that is the ambition. Of course, I have 7 hit points. He has 6 hit points. I have to brave his minefield, and after that we are basically even odds at who will win that fight. So it'll be a tough one. Again, sorry for the long intro. Before we get dived right into the German turn, there's one correction to be made. On Elite Golden's turn, he mistook that there's 1 extra German infantry here, and he rolled for it, so I have the pleasure of re-rolling for a combat that went quite well for me before. I think I scored, was it 5 hits? 5 hits, I think? Yes, 5 hits. And now that's above average, and I get to re-roll only for 6 units as opposed to 7, and likely my odds will drop to only 2 or 3 hits. 3 hits is the average. And there we have it. There are 3 hits. So 1 Russian unit survives in that combat, and I'll simply slap him on the table like this. Okay, now we dive to the German turn. I don't know if I said this or not, but I have 43 bucks to spend, 6 infantry, 1 fighter, 2 battleships, and 1 buck left over. Why the 2 battleships? Well, if the Americans come into this, and I have a small fleet surviving, and the Americans come knocking on our door, at that point, if they have one damaged battleship left over, or two, it still gives us a chance to do some damage against them. Maybe. I mean, perhaps that's a lost cause at that point, and I should just give up on my fleet entirely. But hey, let's try it out and see. The Kaiser likes his fleet, that's all I can say. Okay, on the Eastern Front, I'm sending in 2 infantry, and what's this, 4 artillery and a fighter to engage the Russians in Ukraine and to uncontest that territory. And on this front, we're sending in 5 artillery and 1 infantry to engage those 2 Russian units in Livonia. And nothing happening on the Eastern Front for combat, so I guess this is all in one move. Non-combat, of course, Switzerland, 1 infantry from Venice to Switzerland. I'm going to send in these 3 fighters to Belgium. Now, of course, I can't match what the French have for Air Force, but I can at least dent it. And if we go well everywhere, then the French don't have much resources to do much. So I'm going to send 1 infantry from the Ruhr to Alsace, and I'm going to send 4 infantry to from Holland to Belgium, and one of these guys is going to move south to Alsace. So that's kind of what that looks like, and with this small stack right here. Then from Kiel, I'm loading up 2 transports with the 2 artillery and 2 infantry, and from Berlin, 6 infantry and 2 artillery are moving there. Yeah, you know what? I don't know if I actually want to put. Whatever. I'll leave that up as is. From Berlin to Prussia, that would be 5 infantry. Is it 5? Yeah, 5 infantry. And from Prussia to Poland, 3 infantry. And that takes care of all of our moves, except for this one. We are going to engage the enemy fleet in Sea Zone 9. So very incredibly risky. But statistically, we should only lose 1 ship to the minefield. Hopefully it's the right one. You know what? I'm going to make a minor course correction here. 2 of these infantry from Holland are going to board that ship, and so that means I'm going to have to leave 1 infantry. Sorry, this is all going to be a little bit messed up. At the end of the day, what it looks like is 1 infantry has to go from Holland to the Ruhr, and 1, 2, 3, and only 1 infantry comes down to Belgium. There you have it. Okay, that's what that looks like. Okay, and we're engaging here because there's no enemy to really engage us for land forces. I think we're fairly safe to do something along these lines. But you've convinced me. I'm going to send at least 1 artillery, because why not? It just makes things a little bit more, gives us a bit more play. Let's say that. I'm starting to confuse myself as to what's where. So let's just revert to what we had here before. Let's just go with the original plan. That means that there's a stack of 3 chips. A stack of 3 chips here in Belgium. Sorry about that. At least you know I'm not doing this video for the 16th time with this level of reconsideration. Okay, so these 2 guys, 1 on each, are going to attempt to land here. We'll see if they make it all the way there. I guess I could decide where they're going to go after we see if they survive or not. Okay, so we need to roll for our minefields. Here's 3 dice, succeeding at 1. Yeah, succeeding at 1. For the battleships, that is, right? If that wasn't obvious. So the minefields didn't hit the battleships. Here's a submarine. Miss. And the 2 transports. With 1 hit. So yeah, that is statistically what we expected. So we lose 1 infantry and 1 artillery and 1 transport. But enough to make a landing. Now, if our transport had been sunk too, I would have been surprised and would have chuckled a little bit. Okay, so we've survived. Let's see how that battle goes. I have 3 battleships. What am I talking about? 3 battleships rolling at 3 or less with 3 hits. So that's, I think I statistically would have gotten 2, but I get 3, so that's nice. And now our submarine. Miss on the submarine. And now our enemy has 2 battleships with 2 5s. Wow. Okay, a cruiser. And the cruiser hits. So there's 1 hit for the enemy. And there's submarine. And submarine is a miss. So 1 hit. Now that is not going ideally for them. We will simply tilt a battleship. And 3 hits on them. They take off the submarine. I'm assuming they can change it if they so choose to. And this, and tilt the battleship. Let's see how round 2 looks like. So there, in this game, there's no decrease in resources, a decrease in combat ability for damaged battleship. 3 battleships at 4 with 3 misses. The dice do average out eventually. In 1 submarine. Miss. All misses on this round. The enemy rolls 2 battleships. with 2 hits. So I tilt both my battleships. So that would have been nice to see on round 1. Nonetheless, that's just the way she goes sometimes. So we are going in 3 dice now at 4 with 3 hits. And just for kicks, we're going to roll for our sub with a miss. Is it a miss? It might actually be a hit because I believe subs in this one roll at a 4. Subs are pretty useless in this game. Even the combo rating ability is very limited. And the 2 defensive battleships, 2 hits for them. So everybody gets to win this time around. And those battleships have been quite scary the entire round, but unfortunately they didn't hit on the right round of combat. So with 4 hits, we take off 1, 2, 3, 2 battleships down. And they scored us twice, so we're going to take off 1 sub and 1 battleship, leaving us with 2 damaged battleships left over. And we also get to sink their fleet. So, very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. If things had gone differently on the first round, it would have been a very different story. And we land in London town, capturing that territory. But we'll adjust for that later on, because we have some other battles to do on the board in Russia territory proper. So let's take a look. Sorry, yeah, over here we have engaging in this territory 2 infantry and 4 artillery in combat. So let's roll for that one. Sorry, and a fighter. I forgot about the fighter. I just messed up the Ottomans. Sometimes I think it'd be nice to have a camera attached to the ceiling, but I think that would be a lot more problematic. So we have 2 infantry. 2 infantry rolling at 3 with artillery support. We have, 4 artillery at 4 and the 1 fighter at 2. And the defensive units are going to be 2 at 3. Oh, looks like my battery's starting to run out. 5% left. Let's do this quickly. 4 at 3. 2 hits. 4 at 4 rather. So that's 3 hits. And done. And the enemy here rolls 2 at 3 with no hits. And we're going to take a quick look at the other territory. I have 5 artillery rolling at 3s with 1 and 2. That was 2 hits. Let's just roll for our infantry in case you didn't see that one. It was a 1, but there it is. We scored a hit anyways. So that's it for both those territories. And the Russian defense is nothing. Okay, nothing on them. So that's a little bit too bad. But there we have it. Both those guys are dead, and we've captured both those territories. So we have Ukraine giving us a +3, and we're going to hand this Livonian territory over to the Germans as they capture it, because I think it's much more worthwhile in their hands. So collectively, we go up 11 IPCs from 42 to 53. And not only that, do we capture the treasury of those guys. So that's quite nice. We put our 2 battleships here in Sea Zone 10, and the rest of it goes in Berlin. And my battery is now at 3%. Once it hits that 5%, it disappears quite quickly. So hence the speed. And so we collect our income. So it is 53 plus $1 left over, leaves us at 54. My sympathies to my opponent. I have felt this way twice, where my capital is taken over. And it sucks. It really does suck. And it's something completely that you almost take for granted. So I'm not trying to rub it in or anything else. It's unfortunate. But the show must go on. Cheers all. Hello gentlemen. So as soon as I finished making my video yesterday, I realized I made a mistake on how I took the casualties. So here is kind of a summation of what it would actually look like. I'm going to leave the actual dice rolling to my opponent, but this is to explain it better to myself as well as to my opponents, because I was very much confused by what it was and I wasn't actually sure what the ultimate outcome would look like. And so here is me breaking down the math. First of all, I enter the sea zone with 6 ships. The minefield would hit me on rolls of 1, and of course the 6 ships, the average hit should be 1 hit, and I got hit by the transport, and so the transport got taken off the board. And then we move on to the combat proper. On the first round of combat, the enemy hit me 1 time, and I hit them 3 times. Now, what I did is I took off a damaged 1 battleship, and on their end, this is where I made the mistake. I removed a cruiser, removed a sub, and I damaged their battleship. Now, there's no reason to do that. The cruiser could stay on the board, and I damaged this battleship, and then he has 3 dice as opposed to just 2 dice otherwise. So I damaged both battleships, and the cruiser stays. On the second round of combat, the attacking force hit nothing. They misfired, and the enemy hit me 2 times, just for the battleships, and potentially the cruiser would hit me 1 time as well. We need to roll for that one to see what it actually is. I'm actually going to make that a small dice. Cruiser potentially hit me 1 time as well. So I could have a total of 3 hits. Now, if that carries out, I would take off 1 submarine. I could take off 2 battleships. I would tip them, leaving me 3 ships going into round 3. Now, in round 3, if the submarine would have been part of it, it would have rolled 4 hits. Boom. But the submarine may or may not be part of it, so we might be only looking at a total of 3 hits. So I can leave that here for now and potentially put this off to the side for right now. So let's say 3 hits. Now 3 hits is realistically all we need going into round 3 because he has 2 tipped battleships and a cruiser. So we don't even need to consider this as an option. Let's assume that the cruiser hit. So in that case, round 3, he would be wiped out at the end of round 3, and all of his ships would be wiped out. But he still gets to roll. Now in round 3, he scored 2 hits that were definitive, 2 definitive hits. I wish I had another black dice, but I don't seem to have it on me. 2 hits, and his cruiser may have hit once as well. So this is where the tricky part comes in, because if he scored just 2 hits, then I would take off 2 battleships, and that's if the cruiser hit on the previous round. Just 2 hits, then I'd have 1 battleship. If he scored 3 hits, then I'd take off both battleships, but because I have 3 hits against him anyways, these guys get taken off, meaning that my transport is unopposed and I can make a landing, because all that exists there is just transports in that sea zone. So either way you look at it, I would capture London. Now, there is a potential that his cruiser didn't hit in the second round. And if his cruiser didn't hit in the second round, then the submarine would stay there until round 3 and then be taken off the board with the 3 hits there if his cruiser hit in the third round, meaning that I would win that fight and take away all of ships, right? And so best case scenario for the Entente Cordiale is that we mutually wipe each other out, all ships gone, his cruiser hits on both rounds of combat, and my transport survives and I capture London. Second case scenario is that only one of his hits hit, right? Either this one or the other one, meaning that I'd have just 1 battleship present and he'd have no ships present. And worst case scenario is his cruiser hit on both. Well, in that case, these would be gone as well. Worst case scenario is that he missed on both rounds of combat, and in that case, I would have present 2 tipped battleships left over at the end of combat. So 3 scenarios. If this is the existence of what it looks like, his cruiser missed on 2 rounds of combat, like I said, I would have 2 damaged battleships. If he managed to hit on 1 round of combat, then I'd have 1 battleship, and if he hits on both, I'd take out both battleships, but the plus side is he gets to keep his transport fleet. So I've broken that down as much as possible. My opponent on his turn will roll for his cruiser both rounds of combat, and it might change things. He might have transport's fleet surviving, but regardless, by my math, the German transport with its units drop on London because there's no opposition in that territory. Thanks for watching. Cheers.